Welcome to this edition of the Boob Tube Buddies podcast, featuring our discussion of the AMC show Preacher, episode 105, entitled Sundowner. I'm Adam Foxman, this is Mathis Coos, and you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit. We'd love to field any questions, comments, and concerns, and also, please rate us on iTunes. This is the number one way that you can support our show, and we'd really appreciate it. How you doing, Mathis?
I am doing great. I'm really excited to get going on this episode because it was just another, action-packed blast of an episode that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, me too. Did you want to give a quick mention to the linking to Amazon thing?
Yeah, just a heads up with this episode and going forward, and all of our podcasts going forward, you will find in the description of our podcast, whether that be on iTunes or SoundCloud or Stitcher, you're going to see links to different things. So in the case of Preacher, you're going to see links to the source material, but you also might see links to memorabilia and things. Long story short, if you were already going to buy it on Amazon, well, just use our link and we get a little bit of a cut, and maybe we can turn you on to something new. But it's a great way to support us without having to shell out money you weren't already expecting to spend. So much appreciated if you can do that.
Let's jump into this bitch. So it starts off with the line, and it is, I can't remember, is this DeBlanc or Fiore?
I'm not sure who actually ends up saying the line. I kind of get the two mixed up. I couldn't understand them saying either of each other's name early on until I kind of knew what I was listening for.
Well, I know you like me to do an accent in at least one part of each episode. So it starts off, it's still a black screen, it's, no, 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 what's inside of you isn't God. It's a mistake. That wasn't too bad, right? That was like, I feel like that was like 60% decent.
Yeah, you're getting better. I mean, eventually there's going to be a point where you're good at them, in which case I'll ask you to stop because the entertainment value is gone.
It just will not be funny at all.
Yeah.
It'll sound like I'm showing off.
Pretty much. But yeah, we finally get some exposition about Genesis, and essentially what is inside of Jesse is an abomination by many people's opinions, because it is essentially an interracial baby, but in the heavens. So you have a demon and an angel that made a baby, and it's a huge scandal because they are not supposed to intermingle, and it's a power that challenges God, and now it starts to make sense as to why they're on this mission, and why they're starting to get calls from heaven on the God phone.
Yes, because it could basically turn the tide in the ancient and ongoing battle between heaven and hell. So they're sitting at this booth. Jesse's sitting across from both DeBlanc and Fiore at this booth, and a blonde woman walks in the back. The camera cuts to her. It doesn't seem like much in the beginning, but Jesse eventually ends up basically using this, which I'm still using the phrase "word of God," even though we know it's not God. But he uses this power to force DeBlanc into explaining what's inside of him. And DeBlanc tells him that it's called Genesis. Like you said, it is the product of an angel and a demon who fell in love. And Jesse says, like a baby? Okay, that was terrible. But DeBlanc replies sarcastically, the most powerful entity ever known, the singular force that could shift the balance of power and threaten all creation. Then yeah, it's a baby.
Yeah, he really downplays the assessment from Jesse on this one, but
Yeah.
It's definitely an important moment. And as we've discussed before, we thought it was kind of interesting how they did a slow burn on giving us all this information, as you know all of this by the first page of the comic. But I'd also like to give a shout out to one of our listeners, at Dan the Man Asher on Twitter, who brought up that the executive producer mentioned that this is equal parts a prequel, and although there's definitely things happening that happen in the comics, they're really trying to do more about Jesse before he kind of goes on the plot line of the comics. They're trying to give a little more context, spend a little more time in the town with the congregation, and give you more information there. And Seth Rogen was even talking about how, as they were making it into a film, they wanted to do everything in the comic, they wanted to stay true to it, but they also felt like it wouldn't all quite work, and then they got the blessing of Garth Ennis, the comic creator, to say, look, it's not going to work perfectly as a TV show, make it your own, don't be afraid, I kind of trust the people behind this. So now you're kind of starting to get a picture on not only why they're slow building to stuff like this, but why they're really spending time in this town and developing all the characters before going on the like insane twisted journey that is the actual Preacher comic, which we'll probably be getting to towards the end of the season.
Yeah, perhaps. I wonder if maybe leaving for Carlos is, kind of what is the catalyst to get them out of town. But yes, that is definitely what's happening here. So the blonde woman in the back walks out of the diner, and Fiore and DeBlanc kind of look at each other real quick. Fiore whispers into Blanc's ear. They follow her outside to speak with her, and Jesse kind of just is like, what the hell's going on? He looks out the diner window, and suddenly Fiore and DeBlanc just start beating the shit out of this poor little woman. She's tiny, too, like very short, and just kicking her as she attempts to defend herself, and he is, like, floored. He runs outside, tries to help her, but she totally throttles him, grabs him by the neck, puts him in the choke slam, and then Fiore comes up and just shoots her in the head. And it's like the most like ridiculous. My Preacher is like completely blown away.
What the fuck is going on? Yeah, it's
seriously
very jarring because it's a woman first off, but you also know at this point these are angels, so you're also to an extent just kind of give them they're the good guys, right? Why would they be doing something crazy? And Jesse isn't so sold on these characters, but he still is just like, what the fuck is going on? I've been involved in some fucked up shit. We talked about me killing a Komodo dragon, but this is still crossing a line,
Yeah, I mean, you just shot a woman in cold blood, basically, even if there did seem to be something else happening there. But I will say the mystery doesn't remain too much longer. So Fiore reaches into the car real quick. He sees a wanted flyer with both he and DeBlanc's faces on it. And then all of a sudden, behind them, a light flashes inside of the diner, and the woman's clone emerges from the diner. Fiore, DeBlanc, and Jesse realize that they've got the keys to Jesse's car, not the other one. So they pile into Jesse's truck and then just floor it out of there before she can, just Terminator the shit out of them.
Yeah, so at this point, you realize she's probably connected somehow to them because we've been seeing the same exact thing come from them, right? We've been seeing them get killed in numerous different ways, only to reemerge. And at this point, they give us a little context, and we are explained that it's called reinvigoration. So now you're like, okay,
yes,
it's not clones, it's not this. They're reinvigorated. It's some heavenly process that essentially, I guess, just makes them immortal. You don't really know what it entails or what its limits are. And this girl in particular is a seraphim, so they kind of continue to build a little more of the mythology around it.
Yes, an angel of the highest order, basically, is what she is. And actually, upon a rewatch, you can actually, if you have the audio up loud enough, you can hear Fiore whisper to DeBlanc, it's a seraphim. So you actually get that even in the diner before they walk out, but it's clearly explained then during the car ride. And Jesse's mind is just being blown. He's like, I mean, actual angels, like this is really happening. And then so they're talking about this phone that calls to heaven, and DeBlanc says, you need angel hands to use the phone, which I thought was just kind of fun, just angel hands. Like that is the most untechnical, unsophisticated explanation of technology ever.
Yeah, they're obviously getting more comfortable with the supernatural elements. They've been there all along, but they don't worry about, if someone's this far into the show, they're obviously along for the ride. I remember in the very first issue, Genesis gets out, and DeBlanc and Fiore look very different. They look kind of like, I don't know, angels in hospital gowns, essentially. But the seraphim are these giant, tan, muscular angels with like double wings and fiery eyes, and a seraphim shows up with another seraphim in its arms, and its head's been blown off as Genesis escaped. So they just overwhelm you with all this, this imagery. At this point, though, they're getting comfortable. They're going to say angel hands, and they're not going to feel a need to give you much of a math equation to understand it.
I feel like even if I had angel hands, still when I flicked my Pokeballs on Pokemon Go, I'd still accidentally shoot them way off to the right or the left like I do now.
Yeah, I don't think even angel hands could correct your aim on that. You're pretty bad.
Oh my god, it's the worst. It's always this lilt to the right. Like every single time I do it, it's like my thumb lingers off to the right. It's terrible. But anyway, angel hands probably wouldn't help with that. I just had to tie that in because that's what I was thinking when I watched the episode again yesterday. But anyway, so the Seraphim's back. That was a great tangent.
You've officially dated this episode when people listen to it years later.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. Yeah, okay. So anyway,
I mean, I guess
the Seraphim...
we date every episode, but by reviewing an episode each week. But anyway.
Yes. The Seraphim finds Fiore's car keys at the diner and goes out to their car. Inside, she finds a Bible bearing the name Sundowner Motel. So that's basically how she ends up finding them, which obviously ends up happening here in a minute. So they're in the hotel room. I love, by the way, that we're spending a lot of time with these characters, not like jump from one to the next, like actually getting to kind of really sink our teeth into this interaction and this little plot line that's occurring here. So basically, they're talking about how this Seraphim is hunting them down because they're on Earth without permission, that Genesis is top secret, would be highly coveted if angels and demons learned of its existence, and then all of a sudden they hear something outside. Fiore kind of wonders out loud, oh, maybe it's just the towels, puts his eyes up to the little peephole, and then he looks down all of a sudden kind of sad, and he says, it's not, and then he gets his brains blown out through the back of his head by a gunshot. The Seraphim kicks open the door, bursts into the room, and then probably my favorite personal scene of anything that's happened in Preacher ensues from that moment on.
Yeah, it is just an insane, over-the-top battle. They explain the Seraphim, they explain Genesis. He's completely in the loop, but you don't get much reprieve. And like you said, I appreciate that you're getting more time with these characters, because in the past they've really just been pursuing Jesse, whereas now they're part of the actual like main plot. You're getting to kind of have fun with them, and this
and
next
all that
scene
build up
is just
was
so much
worth
fun.
something. Like because it led to this, and they don't pull away from it too soon to taper it with other things that are happening, your Eugene storylines and your tulips. You really get to stay with this for a minute. So they have this incredible battle. Basically, as it's happening, he's getting the reinvigoration tutorial. He's actually getting to watch it occur. They're dying over and over and over again. They keep killing the Seraphim, and they're like, restrain it. And
yeah, they're like, restrain it, so they quit regenerating, because otherwise you don't see any kind of end in sight to this madness. But it's kind of hard to do, essentially, and it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going.
Yes, and then eventually, like, she ends up punching a hole through the wall from the next room, and so then the camera, I love this shot, starts drawing backwards from their room through the hole, and then so you're witnessing all this now happening from the other room as the camera's still retreating away from the action a little bit, and then Preacher comes up on there, and then the awesome theme song, and then basically after it comes out of the theme song and everything like that, it's Preacher wrestling with her on the ground. Yeah, he's got the knife. He's almost basically got her pinned down into submission. It's looking like the battle might be over. And then Cassidy walks in, sees this happening, casually picks up a gun and blows her brains out. So now it's started all over again. She is reinvigorated. The scuffle ensues, but they finally end up knocking her out. And so then it's cleanup time, and poor Fiore, he is definitely on the sanitation duty here, and he's in there with his chainsaw just hacking up body parts, which, I mean, I can't even imagine the amount of effort that would go into this. Yeah, how many bodies do you think were in there by the end? Like 30?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it seemed like. It literally looked like a mass grave. It was just piles on piles on piles. They did a good job of it. In a hotel room. It's all the same body, and it's a hotel room. Yeah, it's wall to wall.
It's not a big hotel room, and they're basically like...
It's a motel.
Like
it's small.
Bodies.
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought that was just funny. He comes out of there, and even he looks like a little shaken up. Like this is pretty ridiculous.
Not what I signed up for. Yeah.
Yeah. So but anyway, so Jesse is refusing now to give up Genesis. He flat out tells them that, figures that if God wants him to give up Genesis, he can just come and ask him himself. And DeBlanc warns him that there's going to be consequences. He asks, why me? Why did it choose me? That's a pretty natural thing to ask, but they don't know.
They have no answer, right?
They're just custodians.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they know it's important. They're basically on a cleanup mission, so you realize they're kind of just following orders. I will say one thing that struck me during all this carnage is the not too important feeling scene where they're in the bathroom not wanting to answer the phone that requires angel hands, and they're just dreading it. Who wouldn't dread having to go through something like this unending nightmare, right? It's like,
it definitely...
I can just see wanting to shirk that, you know?
Yeah, I definitely understood now why they were feeling that way. But anyway, Jesse ends up walking outside. He's sorry to leave you with the mess, fellas, but I got some prep work for church to do or something along those lines. He walks out. They follow him, but he basically is just done fucking around with them. Uses that voice of God thing and basically just commands them to stay away from him. And so they end up, just that's it. And then later on, Jesse and Cassidy are just drinking beer at the church while they're laundering their completely blood-soaked clothes. And they're asking about each other's tattoos at this point.
Yeah, and they're going back and forth about the tattoos, and there's a point where Jesse on his, I think the upper right of his back has a flower, in which he says, "That's my tulip." And, then they get on to a point where obviously Cassidy is privy to what's going on, doesn't think he should keep on Genesis, but Jesse isn't having it. And, essentially they just keep going back and forth. Cassidy is almost trying to be the voice of reason for him, but it's also Cassidy, so you kind of take everything with a grain of salt because he's not the most responsible being. And, Jesse's just digging his heels in, continuing to be stubborn, and is really hell-bent on keeping this God-given power.
Agreed. And as things progress more and more, you realize that it's not just stubbornness, that Jesse is a very flawed character. Even though he's really the main character in the show, he's not necessarily just a good guy. No,
absolutely not.
And I don't even mean that in like that he's got, a good heart underneath it all. Even his heart is a little murky sometimes. Like, some of the decisions he makes are all for his own glorification, basically.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he's very stubborn and pig-headed, and obviously not the most moral, angelic of characters even in the comics. But it starts on such a plot point, and it starts in such a way where he has good reason. He's given this plot-wise catalyst that you don't get to know him well enough, and you get to know him in context of other things. So it is interesting to really dig in and spend this time with him, because by the time they ever leave Texas and really get on to bigger things outside of this town and everything's discovered, you already have a murky kind of idea of who Jesse is. And by the end of this episode, which we'll get to, you definitely aren't always on his side. I think it kind of becomes a Cassidy as the salvageable character almost,
Well, yeah, there even later on in the episode, where Jesse's hammering that speaker onto the church roof in preparation for the Sunday service, Cassidy even then is telling him, this is a mistake, you should give up Genesis. So really, Cassidy, like you said, despite being completely irresponsible and a bit of a buffoon, is really telling Jesse he is the voice of reason. Jesse should listen to him here, but clearly he doesn't. And you don't know if, maybe this is a little bit of having Genesis inside of him, sort of poisoning the well, sort of making him feel this way, imbued with this power and getting a little punch drunk on it. Or maybe this is just true to his nature. So,
and one interesting piece to me too is, you've seen Ken Cannon be converted to love God and serve God by the word, right? So you've seen this, what happens when you use the power for good, so to speak, even though you're violating free will. As an audience member, you have more context now than Cassidy or Jesse, and you realize, and he's putting the speaker up, you're starting to kind of get inklings that he's going to use this on more than just one person to bring them to God, and you already know how that can turn out. It seems like it's really based on their true nature, regardless of what you tell them to do, because ultimately you're still just giving them actions, not...
Well, yes, and everything's open to interpretation. There were these books when I was a kid, really juvenile books called Amelia Bedelia. Did you ever read those at all?
I remember that rhyme scheme title, but I don't know that I ever actually read one. I was more of a Matilda cat.
The concept behind Amelia Bedelia is that, like, a character in Amelia Bedelia would say, "All right, time to hit the road," and she'd go out and, like, actually start slapping the road. So the power actually ends up a little bit like that in terms of, like, there are literal translations to things. There are ways to view it's how people use passages from the Bible to justify all sorts of actions that probably were never the intentions of the original authors. And I think that that's really what we see more and more as the power is used, is the unintended consequences of actually using this power. Mm-hmm. There's almost always some blowback.
Yeah, I always think of the genie concept, and before, like, it was called genie, it was the jinn, which is basically a wish-fulfilling demon, and there was always some kind of, like, Twilight Zone twist. You ask for eternal life, but then you get turned into a rock, so you're never going to go away, but it's not much of a life. So it's always this unintended consequence. It's never what the actual intention of the person who made the wish was. It's always this, like, worst case scenario to grant that wish.
Yes. So anyway, that's, at least up to this point in the episode, that's really it for Cassidy and Jesse, and then it moves on to Tulip and Emily's plotline. Before we really get into it, just overall, what did you think about their interactions? Did you find it entertaining? Did you find it slow? What did you think?
I didn't love it overall, but I didn't hate it. I mean, it served its purpose. You got to know both characters. I'm warming up to Emily a little more, but, like, she's intentionally bland, especially when you contrast her to all these vibrant, flawed characters, and the fact that there's fucking angel carnage going on at a motel.
Well, she's a normal human being, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, I think she's there as the contrast point, as the voice of reason and the conscience piece, but it still also gives a little bit of humanity to Tulip, particularly when she runs in there angry and crushes her daughter's art thing, and then immediately Emily goes out to the car and just gives her a guilt trip about it, and Tulip doesn't take it that well and decides to, maybe do the right thing in this situation, right?
Yeah, she comes back, she knocks on Emily's door, offers to fix the art thing, quote unquote, and so they're kind of having their little moments throughout the episode. They're sitting there, they're fixing that thing. Tulip is also helping her fold up, I guess it's probably church programs. Seems like there's an awful lot of them. Obviously, they're expecting a big turnout in church this week, and Tulip offers to babysit Emily's sick daughter while she runs church errands. And I was really glad that Emily felt uncomfortable with this, because it would have been real suspended reality.
If she's like, "Oh, sure, that's great."
If she's just like, "Yeah, exactly."
Yeah.
So she kind of inquires a little bit, like, "Do you have any experience at all with ever watching a child?" And then you get this nice little back piece information where Tulip says she had a child once.
Yeah, and that is probably the most relevant piece of this interaction. Tulip doesn't want Emily to be into Jesse. She obviously is, but it's not like she's doing much in the way of, like, flirting or coming on to him or really trying to advance that in any way. She's
just a big part of his life.
Yeah, right? She's unthreatening, but the threat, I think, is the connection. Like, she is intricately tied to the church, and as we see and we'll continue to discuss, like, that is where he is completely committed to in a very flawed way almost.
Yes, okay, but I don't want to get too bogged down with the Tulip and Emily stuff, because there were a couple of important, like, moving the chess pieces forward a little bit, or, kind of enriching the overall tapestry of the show, but it was nothing particularly exciting. In fact, if anything, you were at like a 10 of 10 in terms of excitement level, action, sort of moments with the Jesse stuff earlier. But this is bringing you back down into a little bit more of the, like, let's advance the plot and, I don't know, kind of thicken up these characters' backstories. But,
sure.
And then in the meantime, actually, while this is going on, Eugene, Arseface, is having these little interactions where this kid is nice to him at school by the locker, which really catches him off guard. And every time, man, the kid who plays Eugene really gets me with his acting, because it's really just his eyes, but like the innocence there, like, and the look of total shock and surprise just from getting a hello instead of having somebody bully him or something like that. That was just a nice moment. And then later they sit down and actually have lunch from him, and it doesn't seem like there's anything sinister or backhanded in anything that they're doing. And after school they actually invite him to go along with them, and then you think, oh, this is the moment where they embarrass him or something like that. But no, they actually go down into this little tunnel and they start lighting fireworks, and like, he's a little worried at first, but then he just joins in, and he thinks that it's beautiful. And it's just like, I don't know, kind of a warm moment where like, finally, this kid has had a really shitty go of it, but he's actually sort of come out of the other side. And I don't know, I thought it was pretty touching and just kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add there. I mean, I thought they did a great job with it. They very much stack the cards against him in this show. You're obviously getting more and more insight slowly into what actually transpired, and maybe he's not the most innocent character either, but at the same time, like, you've seen his dad say, you should have finished the job, angrily, and so like, that's such a low point for him that the audience has taken on to actually have kids warm up to him and like kind of expose them to normal kid interactions. It's the last thing you expect the show to deal to you, so it's a nice little heartwarming moment in between some of the carnage and other things that happen throughout.
Yeah, it really is. So I like those scenes. And real quick before I get into the next big scene that pushes the plot forward, there was something happening throughout the episode of like, Miles, who's the mayor, is standing in his bedroom. He's listening to a message from somebody named Cynthia at Greenacre, which is that sustainable energy company where the executives were blown away by Kincannon and his shotgun the episode before. And this Cynthia is, inquiring about Kincannon's meeting and, where have you seen Jerry, the Greenacres executive, and basically just letting you know, like, okay, this has not been forgotten or swept under the rug. There's definitely, like, that's still a thread that's hanging out there that somebody's just waiting to pull.
Yeah, he's not, they keep you informed enough to know, like, what is some of the fallout from what was a pretty shocking conclusion to last episode.
Yes, exactly. We're not just, like, sweeping under the rug. This is actually going to continue bearing water.
Yeah, so they give you enough of that to where you realize, like, some things are moving forward, but, it's just kind of a small, subtle thing happening throughout the episode, which eventually you'll get the conclusion of a little later. But I thought they did a good job keeping us informed about it, even without that needing to be, like, a big part of this episode or needing to start the episode off,
The only other part where it was even really mentioned, at the very least during the middle of the episode, was Jesse setting up chairs outside of the church for Sunday service, and Miles, the mayor, drops by and tells Jesse that, that he's thinking about doing something wrong, but he's doing it because if he did what's right, more people would get hurt. Jesse asks for details, but Miles is like not really going any further into it. But basically, Miles is looking for some guidance. Like, is it okay to do the wrong thing if it means that, good people are hurt less than? But anyway, so he ends up getting distracted, but that's really all that comes
When you
about.
Heard that line, what came to your mind? When I heard it, I was like, is he thinking about potentially attempting to kill Kincannon, which is definitely the wrong thing, but he would potentially save lives? I mean, were you inferring anything different?
Yeah, I was thinking it had to do something with Kincannon, or if nothing else, then maybe covering up sort of what had happened here, whether it's lying about it or something along those lines. Either way, he's definitely not. Part of him is wanting to come clean and I don't know, go to the authorities and get this handled the right way.
Sure.
The other part is dealing with it on his own.
Yeah.
So I think that's really all that came of that. And actually, in that same scene, Tulip comes inside to the church carrying supplies, and Cassidy sort of corners her in the supply closet, and then he ends up hearing Jesse call her name, and then he realizes, you're his Tulip. He actually says that to her. He says, you're his Tulip. And then so there's just this kind of moment where Cassidy is sitting there all heartbroken inside of the closet while she's out talking to Jesse about how she's helping Emily and this and that. But it's kind of sad because he realizes, oh shit, this woman that I think I'm falling in love with is actually in love and pining over my best mate. You know.
Now, is this, and maybe I'm just not thinking clearly, but is this the first time they really make any kind of connection of them knowing each other? Because didn't Tulip meet Cassidy completely separate with the hospital incident, and then, or have they all been in the same room together?
Okay, so you're saying more along the lines, is this the first time that Jesse has seen, because Jesse actually doesn't see Cassidy in this scene.
No, I'm saying,
so,
like, is this the first time that Cassidy, who knows Tulip separately, realized that Jesse even knows this person? Or have they seen each other since? I'm trying to remember.
That's a fair point. They definitely are in church together in one scene, but they're sitting multiple pews apart, and they wouldn't necessarily just notice each other.
Gotcha.
But they have been in the same room together, because yes, they were sitting in that first episode.
Yeah, okay,
when he was about to quit preaching or whatever. They were both sitting in the pews.
But that to me is the connection. Like, not only has he seen that, the tattoo on Jesse's back, but he's making that connection that this girl that kissed him on the ride to the hospital that he's kind of fallen for not only knows Jesse, who he's also like best mates with, but like there's some kind of history there. So that's how it struck me. But I was also trying to rack my brain of like, have they not crossed paths like all in the same room? But maybe you're right. I think it was just that church like sermon where they were just members.
Yeah, I think so. So basically then on Sunday, Jesse is preparing to address all his congregants, and they're all gathering outside. Emily walks in to tell him that Eugene wants to talk, and so this is a really powerful scene.
Yeah, definitely.
At first Jesse kind of puts off Eugene and commends Emily and Tulip for doing a great job setting up the church, and Emily kind of frowns when she even hears Tulip's name and tells Jesse, okay, I'm sending Eugene in.
Yeah, that was an interesting scene. I mean, it was subtle, but she was frustrated, and it's almost like she didn't like Tulip getting credit, that she did most of the work, and that the only reason Tulip was even helping is because she fucking crushed my daughter's art project, and she's a bad person to begin with. So now this is the first real pining you've almost seen for Jesse in a little while.
She doesn't want to compete for his attention or his praise. Mm-hmm. So, but then Eugene walks in, and he basically essentially asks Jesse to reverse whatever it was he did to Mrs. Loach. He says, I just don't think that God would like that. Not like that. It's cheating, he says. Jesse ends up telling Eugene what he did for him, and what he did for the town. It's God's will. It's not cheating, he said. Eugene tells Jesse that he can't tell people, he can't force people to see the light.
So real quick, I mean, is there, is Eugene just like assuming that he has this power? He doesn't fully know, right? He just knows that she opened her eyes, and he knows that he saw Kincannon be converted, but that was the only thing that struck me, is like, does he know he has this power unequivocally? And
no, because the last scene that we have with him is him staring in awe at the beauty of the fireworks in that tunnel. So nothing occurred. I think that he comes in there, and at some time off screen in between then and now, he's had this epiphany where he realizes preacher is having some sort of profound effect on people, maybe through something not necessarily within the realms of what would be considered normal, actual power or whatever, you know, like of persuasion. But so yeah, he somehow, I guess, because that's certainly what he's inferring.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, ultimately, I think the only thing was missing to really drive the point home of why Eugene thinks this is weird is some kind of like explanation line where Jesse essentially says, like, even if they won't naturally believe, I'll make them. Something to where he kind of implies it's force. Like, it's not God coming into your heart, it's force. I think that would be enough to have me buy why Eugene's concerned, because otherwise that part confused me.
Well, yeah, I mean, because to Eugene it feels artificial.
Yeah, it feels artificial, but as the audience, I just feel like I don't know that I would come to this conclusion and not instead just think that this guy's a fucking amazing preacher, right?
I just think that he is basically Tony Robbins, you know, like that he just has the power to move you. The
power to move you, and then, like, you know, a speaker in his ear with someone in the audience member to feed him information. But I digress.
yeah, exactly.
But then things get real fucking dark, right?
Yes, they do. So the tension is building. Preacher's just getting aggravated. He just wants to get Eugene's ass out of there. And Eugene just keeps pushing. And finally, he turns and he yells, "Go to hell, Eugene!" But he accidentally employs the word of God when he does it. Hears this terrible noise, turns around, and Eugene's no longer there.
Yeah, it has a kind of menacing zoom in on the wooden chapel floor, and you realize that they really went to hell. And that's when, you know, we've been alluding to it this whole description, but I mean, Jesse's a very flawed character. He's very stubborn, and he just sent someone to hell. It's pretty fucking dark. It's a bleak moment.
And to be honest, even though he clearly is, confused and understands what happens in the moment, he doesn't seem all that upset.
He's not that perturbed. Yeah,
he's really not. Like, if I banished, somebody that I only had like a passing acquaintance with, like, with Eugene, like, it's not his best buddy, but somebody he knows, kind of like you and me. If I sent you to hell, I feel like I'd be, I don't know, at least slightly upset with myself for having done so.
Yeah, but now imagine sending me to hell if every time I talked, it kind of sounded like I was farting.
I mean, that's basically what it sounds like anyway.
Okay, well, then that's an honest assessment. I just wanted to check that litmus test off.
So anyway, that is basically how that scene goes. Now, the final scene, you kind of see what Miles had been alluding to earlier, the mayor. And it's him basically... how exactly is the scene framed? I know that there's a car that's all burned up. There's charred bodies in it, and it's the executives from Green Acres.
Yeah, there's an overturned car. It's horrific. There's I think it kind of gets a zoom in of a charred skull. It's obviously been horrific, and Miles is calling in that there's been an accident. So now you're immediately thinking of the conversation with Jesse, should I do something wrong to save more people? And where my mind went was, well, Miles is going to make some kind of buffoon's attempt to kill, like, this cold-hearted killer, and maybe that'll be just comedy for a later episode and he'll fail. Instead, they deliver on what's being implied, in which it looks like he covers up the death of these people with a car crash, and in his mind, he's probably thinking, now Ken Cannon has no one else he needs to kill. His obstacles are removed. I'm on his good side. It's not ideal, but no more people are going to die.
Basically, I think that's what it is, because if he went to jail, then what happens to Ken Cannon power? And while he is an extremely flawed and almost manipulative, if not completely apathetic character. He alone basically has the power to really kind of change the fortunes here with the city. And if he were to get carted off to jail for murder, then Anvil might go from, this town with its best, rosiest years behind it to just a complete, stain of shit on the map, basically.
Yeah, Miles, it's clear here that Miles isn't optimistic of a way forward without Kincannon for whatever reason, and so that's kind of where we're left at. I will say all this is an effective scene, and it delivers on kind of tying up some things to an extent from last episode. I think it should have ended with Eugene going to hell, because that was the stronger emotional
I agree.
moment.
That was the impactful part, and I kind of felt like by slipping into this denouement scene that they kind of really took away from the height of the scenes, like where the show had reached critical mass, basically, and had its most climactic moment. I thought that was a bit of a misstep by then. And even though I like that they tied it up a little bit, I would have preferred if this happened before that scene.
Yeah, same here. I mean, the show's not entirely linear. It jumps around with its storytelling because there's kind of different plots going on. So they easily could have broken up what was kind of a straight shot of a lot of time spent in the church. But at the end of the day, it's a minor quabble. I will say,
small gripe.
Yeah, I will say, is denouement a French director known for shooting dead, burnt bodies?
I don't know.
I've lost, but I'm not as cultured as you. But that brings another episode to a close. How would you rate it? What did you think?
I thought that this was one of the best episodes. I thought that everything that happened at the Sundowner Motel was this show at its absolute most visceral and just entertaining in general. It was wacky, it was extreme, and it was just very, very fun to watch. And there were a couple of parts to me that were a little sleepy. The Tulip and Emily parts really did not get me going too much or anything. The parts with Eugene I thought were very sweet and definitely make you feel something, a moment of hopefulness and optimism in this kid's terrible, shitty life. And then, of course, the complete reversal, the 180, where he literally has his soul banished to hell by an uncaring and unrelenting creature.
And I almost wonder if the only reason they put in the scenes of him being accepted was because, like, okay, we're going to have in the last scene, or the last episode, these terrible things said by his father. We're now going to end an episode with him being banished to hell. Are we just being too hard on this kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, yes.
They're like, we have to put some kind of a niceness in there for him, otherwise we're just cruel. And I will say,
yeah.
Like with the journey of Jesse, I appreciate it because I like complex characters that you don't just love or hate, but it's a bit of both. But you also wonder, like, man, can they redeem the preacher, like the namesake of the show afterwards, or does it become almost like Breaking Bad where you just love to hate him and that's the appeal? I do hope they redeem him because he's a character I love to love and enjoy in the comics.
Agreed. And right now, after this moment, particularly honestly in his reaction to it, because you could see how this would happen, and then immediately you as a human being would feel so shitty and want to fix it. But he is like really just unflinching in his reaction to it. I mean, you can tell there's definitely a moment of like, wait, what the fuck just happened? And that's it. He shrugs it off and goes out and delivers his sermon, presumably. So... but anyway, overall, I think it was my favorite episode actually so far of this season. I thoroughly enjoyed it. To me, that first 10 minutes of it, everything that happened up through where the intro music comes on, and then even the couple of minutes past that, were just absolutely top notch, and what I'm hoping the show can continue to deliver on.
Yeah, I love this episode as well. I don't know if it's my favorite, but at the same time, I don't know which one is my favorite. I think in my mind, it is kind of build out perfect episodes with my favorite scenes. But all in all, there's not been an episode I don't like. This certainly was in the upper echelon because there's a lot of action, there's a lot of development, things are moving forward. Nothing seems wasted. Even the Emily Tulip stuff, which wasn't as exciting, didn't feel forced, and it did at least develop both characters and kind of get things where they need to be. So all in all, I'm still on board and still loving it.
Agreed. Well, and I guess that wraps it up. We will be recording our next episode in just a couple of days, and then after that, I think we're just one episode then behind being current?
Yeah, we should be current pretty soon here. I'd have to double check, but I think we definitely have one more after this, and then the one airing Sunday. But by the time finale's on, right, we should be doing them within the next day of them airing, so that'll be great for the audience.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, thank you very much for following us and listening to our episodes here. We're just starting up on Stranger Things on Netflix as well. So if you've enjoyed what we've done here with Preacher, we would definitely ask you to come and listen to our Stranger Things podcast. It's an incredible show. We're only an episode or two in at this point, but really digging it, and would love to have you come join in the conversation for that as well.
All right. Thank you all so much.